What the heck was that? The Pacers' first NBA Cup loss pre-finals as the Heat embarrassed them on their home floor. No effort, no cohesion from the starters. What the heck was going on defense? What was that? We'll try to get to the bottom of it on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Saturday or Sunday whenever you're tuning in, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, oh man, what was that? Another crummy performance from the Pacers. Maybe you could say they're third in 4 games. 83 points in Charlotte, 90 points in Orlando, and now just a complete no-effort, worst way for a professional sports team to lose performance against the Miami Heat. At one point, it felt like the Pacers were clicking, and now it feels like the opposite once again. So much to discuss from this game. Effort, starters getting completely pulled just for effort after many timeouts, did nothing to change that. The starting 5 in general being terrible in this game. So much awful defense from the Pacers. What happened? I mean, just what happened? Awful night for the Blue and Gold, who are now 5-7. Miami Heat beat them 124-110. There's not a lot of analysis to do about this, and I will do my best to talk about it for as long as I can because it is the story of the game, and it's just kind of an intrinsic want for a human being. But to me, the absolute worst way a team of professional athletes paid to play a sport can lose in that sport is by not trying hard enough. And that is what happened to the Pacers today. There's no other way to put it, right? Like any sort of strides anyone could have felt like they were making defensively. I felt like they're still not a good defensive team, but closer to the team that finished last year, right? In terms of defensive capabilities, had some decent defensive games recently, even though they didn't necessarily win them. Haliburton's had some games of late where he was trying much harder on that end of the floor. Again, the Pacers are not a good defensive team. They are 22nd right now. Like that is much better, like 7-8 spots better than they were last year. That's not to say they're a good defensive team, but you could see progress at times. Tonight, heck no, a holy cow. So many times they just weren't talking, weren't rotating, weren't pointing. Wide open Heat shooters all the time, every possession. There was one, I believe this was a Haliburton mistake. It was so hard to tell with the lack of effort who was truly messing up. There was one after a made Pacers free throw. Tyler Hero just ran to the corner, transition 3. No one got back. That can't happen. Josh Richardson, all of a sudden, there's no one within. You could build a 2-lane freeway in between him and the closest defender. Nobody found him. Nobody knew where he was. Haywood Highsmith scored twice in the first 3 minutes, just leaking back behind the defense. No one knew where he was. Wide open. It was weird. The vibe started bad in that way, them losing Heat players. And the Pacers didn't play very well in the first half, but they scored enough and went on enough bursts to be in it and be ahead. And they were down 5 or 6 at halftime, right? Like it felt like, oh, they played a bad half and they're within 6. They can come back. They could be, if they start playing well, they can win this. Instead, they just forgot Kevin Love was a player for the first couple of minutes of the second half. He got wide open threes. He had a layup. Kevin Love stole a pass and went coast to coast. That is the kind of effort the Pacers displayed in this game. In the defensive effort, they were bad on defense, even beyond effort. But just to completely forget about players, the lack of attention to any sort of detail was shocking. Shocking. In any sort of context of strides they've made or not this season, pathetic defensive effort. And that bled into their whole night. The first half offense was okay. It wasn't great. It was fine. It was good enough. Right? Like I said, they're down 6. Okay, yeah, whatever. They scored 55 points in the first half. They actually scored more in the second half. That's not because of their good players, the ones we'll be talking about. The second half started, again, close game, right? 61-55 before Kevin Love goes on this crazy stretch. 5 minutes into the half, it's 81-64. So 9 points for the Pacers in 5 minutes. I suppose that's okay. That's not even that good of a quarter. And a bunch 20 for the Heat in that same stretch. In that time, in that 5 minutes, the first 5 minutes of the third quarter, Rick Carlisle took a timeout at the 9:42 mark, and Rick Carlisle took a timeout at the 7:55 mark and at the 7:02 mark. He was trying to juice up that group, to get everybody to focus and play harder on both ends, and it didn't work. The message was not being received, or it was not the right message, or players just didn't want to do it and were coasting or not. The reason doesn't matter. It can't happen. A professional sports team of athletes paid to play and play well can't have that. Just can't be the reason you lose a game. And so frustrating for everyone, right? Haliburton, kudos to him. First of all, was playing well offensively prior to the effort implosion. Took the stand and actually talked to us after the game and said it's the repercussions of not doing your job of the starting fives, no effort getting benched. He was frustrated with their effort on both ends, and then said doing a lot of dumb bleep on both ends of the ball. They looked bad. We'll get to the starters in a moment, but that should not be how a team loses an NBA game, especially one when you just fell under 500. It's the NBA Cup. It's a team you might be close to in the standings come into the season. It's never excusable, but and to be clear, I would say every team in the league has like one night per season like this. But they shouldn't. They shouldn't. Everybody, top to bottom, has to be better and can't have this be the reason they lose. And I understand thinking that maybe this group just played bad, right? We'll talk about the starters in a moment, like from an impact perspective. I get that. But I also was there at the game. Lots of booing because they were not playing well. I also saw the Pacers sub with 7:02 to go in the third quarter, down 17, and they brought in Obi Toppin, Jarris Walker, TJ McConnell. Those guys are in the rotation. And then Enrique Freeman and Johnny Furphy. Full hockey sub. They said, you guys are not giving enough effort. You're not going to play. And that group did great. They were trying. They trimmed it a little bit. Then Quentin Jackson came in. I don't remember exactly when he came in, like 4 minutes to go. And then Quentin Jackson was sensational. And they got it down to 10 twice. They almost got it to single digits. They had a chance to get the game to single digits. And then Bam came back in and was like, nah. And Bam was being guarded by a player 5 inches shorter than him, who's a rookie, and he should take advantage of that. But that group tried. They tried and they hustled and they did hustle stuff, and they have lots of hustle players, and they made it a game. Like that made it clear that it was an effort thing. So kudos to that group. We can talk about them later, but I will say right now, if any one of Jarris Walker, TJ McConnell, or Obi Toppin had the game they had Friday night on Wednesday, the Pacers would have beat the Magic. They needed any of that bench. They didn't get it. Either way, effort, terrible. Cannot happen. Somehow my camera got unplugged. I did not even notice. Hopefully it comes back on while I'm still talking. So that can't happen. Brutal for the Pacers. And yet, another concern here. The starting five was awful as a unit. The Pacers starters, Siakam, Turner, Haliburton, Mathurin, Shepherd. 19 minutes, 44 seconds. Some of this is effort. Some of this is poor performance. They scored 33 points in 19 minutes and 44 seconds. For reference on that amount of time, imagine there's 4 minutes left in the first half. That's basically 20 minutes, right? Imagine there's 4 minutes left in the first half and the Pacers had 33 points. You'd think, wow, that sucks. That's terrible. They need to play better. The Heat against that lineup in those 19 minutes and 44 seconds scored 54 points. A point a minute, more than a point a minute, that group beat the Pacers starting five by. Minus 21 in 19 minutes and 44 seconds. Bad on both ends. Pacers shot quality, terrible. 50.5% expected true shooting, given their shots. That group was 4 for 19 from 3 and 10 for 20 on twos. The Heat's shot quality, 56% expected effective field goal percentage. They went 11 for 18 on twos and 9 for 18 on threes. Just awful from that group. And some of you may jump in and go, well, they should change the group. And on a night like this, maybe you look at everything because they were that wimpy for a lot of this game. But that group's been good. Every game before this, right? They've been fine. They debuted the night Nesmith got hurt for 4.5 minutes in New Orleans. They played the Hornets. The Pacers stunk that night, and yet they played 15 minutes of an even draw against Charlotte. They were +9 against New York, and they were +3 against Orlando. They win their minutes. They're playing fine together. That lineup makes sense. It has players at every position that makes sense and can fit in some way. And they were just terrible today. Effort, defense, communication, rotation, top to bottom. A group that was +9 entering the day couldn't do a thing. You will not win like that. That group has to be better in every way, both ends. And I can't even describe what made them feel off. I would say, to me, the headliner was ball movement. Haliburton was playing well. He was looking to score early. He was being very aggressive. It never felt like the ball was ping-ponging into the paint. They would move the ball well on the perimeter, or they would drive, but very rarely both on one possession. And so they had a lot of rough decisions on drives. This is a random play that sticks with me a lot, but like Siakam went for his normal spin move on a catch once, and it felt like he just kind of defaulted into it. Like he caught and just spun, even though he didn't really feel the defender yet. He didn't create any advantage with it, threw a tough pass out to the corner, and that was it. Like that was the whole attack. And I don't want to pick on him. He's been really great this season, right? Steadying hand. He led them in shots tonight, which he should do more often, given how he's playing this year. But that one play just sticks in my head as like they were ineffective at doing the things that normally make them effective. And so for so many reasons, the group that's supposed to be good for the Pacers, their opening five with their 2 former All-Stars and current former All-NBA player and ascending guard and a great veteran center, and they just were terrible. It was terrible. The second worst group for the Pacers game, to remind you, the starting 5 was -21. The second worst group that played at all for the Pacers was -3. One of those groups played 42 seconds. That was Walker, Mathurin, Haliburton, Siakam, Turner. So the starters with Walker instead of Shepherd, -3 and 42 seconds. Turner, Siakam, Walker, Shepherd, McConnell. So McConnell in for Haliburton, Walker in for Mathurin was -3 in 6 minutes and 6 seconds. Every other lineup that played was -2 or better, and several of them were positive. Toppin, Jackson, Walker, Furphy, Freeman was +8. Toppin, Jackson, Walker, Freeman, McConnell was +6. Of actual real lineups, Toppin, Haliburton, Mathurin, Walker, McConnell was positive. Siakam, Toppin, Walker, Shepherd, McConnell was positive. This just sounds like a bunch of gobbledygook names in a row. I'm telling you all this to say lots of combos were good in this game. Even their worst combos played them to like a 1-possession fight for several minutes. That's fine. That's totally fine. You know why? Because normally, if a group with 2 bench players and 3 starters loses by 3, the starters can make that up because it's supposed to be the best 5. They were the opposite of that in this game. Everything stunk for the Pacers. Everything. The starters stunk. The effort stunk. The defense and attention to detail stunk. That can't happen. Everybody was taking the blame and responding correctly, which I don't know if give credit is the right term, but like they said what you would expect the team to say after a game like that. But now it's about response. And for this Pacers team, last year, that was their superpower. They would lose in a disheartening fashion or just lose a game they were expected to win or whatever, and they would come out the next game and look good and win and be like, oh, yeah, okay, they can do it still, right? This year, we already have seen they got smoked by the Knicks in New York and then lost to Philly in a game they should have won. They lost in overtime. No matter, they'll make it up in Orlando. Just kidding. They'll give up 50 and lose to the Magic. No response that time. No response to their 90 points in Orlando that happened earlier this week. A lot of stuff about the Pacers different this year. People will point to many reasons as to they think why. Haliburton was not the issue tonight. He was aggressive early. He was scoring. His defense was bad. But in total, I would probably say he was their best starter today. Maybe Siakam. Either way, they needed more from everyone. They needed that group to perform and even be okay. They weren't even close. They gave the Pacers not close to enough in terms of effort and ability. And they dug way too big of a hole for the spunky fighting reserves to keep up. Shout out to those guys who we'll talk about later. Really brutal for the Pacers, who just had to be better. We'll talk about how they can be better. Some players who were good. What's going on here? As we continue on today's Locked On Pacers. Before we do that, though, I want to talk to you guys about the great people over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. They are America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers on FanDuel can bet $5. If you win, you'll get $150 in bonus bets. How about that? The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get that hunch in the middle of a game, happens to everybody, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more so you can be as informed as possible. And all of that information on the same page where you place your bet. So just visit FanDuel.com today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen should be Locked On Heat. Hear about their perspective of a win for the Heat. Bam, who had been slumping-ish on offense this year, went crazy. Now, he was not having a particularly awesome game until he kind of clowned on Enrique Freeman for like a quarter, which he should do because he's Bam Adebayo. Or hear them talk about Kevin Love looking like 2016 Kevin Love for half a quarter. Or Haywood Highsmith having a perfect night shooting. Tyler Hero and Terry Rozier went 10 for 25, and the Heat rolled to a win. Just, what can you say? Locked On Heat for more. I apologize if my energy is not there today, which is very fitting given the topics of today's show. Extremely long day. Madness in the morning, Pacers at night, shoot arounds in between, lots of writing to do. And it's extremely late. It's almost 2:30 a.m. So the other thing I asked about after the game for the Pacers is a trend, becoming a trend in a way that I didn't expect. They played the Magic, obviously, earlier this week. And in that game, they, air quotes here, won the turnover battle 16-17. Rick Carlisle said they had a lot of shots get blocked that he would constitute as turnovers. To that, I agree. But either way, they had the key thing for the point I'm launching towards is they had 16 turnovers that night. It's too many. They had 20 against the Heat today. That was really the biggest discrepancy stat for the scoreboard. The Pacers shot 51.2%. The Heat shot 51.7%. That's extremely close. And they were one shot attempt apart. The Pacers were 14 for 35 from three for 40%. The Heat were 15 for 42 from three. 1-3 apart. Pacers shot better from deep. Were better on the glass and were much better on the offensive glass. Right? A lot of indicators that it should have been a close game, but it wasn't because the Pacers had 20 turnovers. Jarris Walker had 7 of them. And I don't even think Jarris played like awful. 7 turnovers is terrible. But like he had some nice offensive moments and made 3 threes and defended okay and had 7 rebounds and 4 assists and like was a lead ball handler for a group that was doing interesting stuff. 7 turnovers is terrible, to be clear. But either way, 20. 2 from Mathurin, 3 from McConnell, 2 from Furphy, 2 from Jackson, and a 1 from a bunch of other guys. I mean, this is for a team that is lacking the per possession offensive efficiency they had last year and is not a good rebounding team. They cannot give away possessions. They can't afford it at all. And yet they did. Again, their turnover rate is way too high for the way they're trying to play. They are currently just 1 spot below average in turnover rate this year, and they need to be inside the top 10 given the way they're playing. If they were better per possession offensively, they could get away with that turnover rate. Last year, by the way, they were the 6th best taking care of the ball. This year, slightly below average. If they were at last year's offensive potency per possession, no problem, right? If they were defending a little better and grabbing boards, so the possession battle wasn't so against them all the time, right? 12 more free throws for the Heat tonight. Yeah, okay, whatever. You can turn the ball over more and get away with it. They can't. Their margins are way too thin. And the last 2 games, that has been a major problem for them. And so I will say, ironically, some of that was an effort thing. Lazy passes across the middle or one-arm push passes for some reason that could have been other passes. That is an effort thing. They've got to put more into that. But some of that's just attention to detail again. And they've got to get that number. I mean, 13, 12, 10. 0 is the goal, the impossible goal, right? But less. So much went wrong for the Pacers. And it felt winnable again. Their 3rd game of the season. Only their 3rd game of the season where they never had a 4th quarter lead. They were never close. This was only their 2nd blowout. And I've kind of just like shrugged off their loss in New York because they shot 3 for 30 from 3. They shot 40% from 3 this game and got blown out. I mean, I'm out of ways to say they just didn't work hard enough to win. And the Heat did. The Heat played desperate and got it done. I don't want to talk about the group stage rankings yet. It doesn't super matter. But the Pistons are 2-0 in the Pacers group. Like they this loss hurts them and point differential matters, and they lost by 14. They're going to have to be really good in their other 3 games to have a chance. They still control their own destiny to some extent. They need the no, they don't. They need the Heat to lose a game elsewhere. But then they can control their own destiny to some extent. But this was not the NBA Cup start the Pacers wanted. And so many things were just dreadful. But not everything. First of all, I've said this a lot, had they won, storyline would have felt much different. Aggressive Haliburton. He started over 3, and he took 3 shots pretty quickly, and I thought, oh, man, he's looking at the rim. And then he kept doing it, and he got going. 18 points on 14 shots, 4 for 9 from deep, with no free throws. 18 points on 14 shots is a pretty nice night. 8 assists. Eric Spoelstra gushed about him all day at shoot around in the morning and pregame media availability for the Heat. That was maybe the most aggressive Haliburton from a scoring perspective we've seen all year, and then he settled in as a passer as the game went on. That's kind of what last year felt like. It wasn't at that level, obviously, but his defense was, I think this was his worst defensive game of the season, but that was an encouraging thing to me offensively. And the other thing that he did, and the other thing that would have been part of talking about the lead of this game had the Pacers won was, and there was a moment in the first quarter where Khalil Ware got thrown the ball down low, and he kind of bobbled it out of bounds. Turnover for the Heat. And Tyrese Haliburton runs into the crowd full speed to try to get the ball and flip it to the ref so the Pacers can just go on offense. They can turn around and run. That is how they played fast last year when they could. Even on random stoppages throughout a game, Buddy Hield or Tyrese or someone would just go get it and try to go quick, get across half court. Let's go. And I haven't seen that as much this year. So when that happened, I thought, oh, man, they're making an effort to play with some gusto tonight, some tempo, some speed and pizzazz. It did not stick. But I felt like they were thinking about it in a way that hadn't been the case. And Haliburton, of course, with the night he had scoring, was a big part of it. 3 other Pacers in the starting 5, not named Haliburton, shot 42.9% on the dot. Siakam 6 for 14. Off-ish night for him. He was fine. Myles Turner, 3 for 7, 9 points, 5 rebounds. Just has to be more impactful in these games. Bam didn't totally kick his butt. Bam did most of his work against Enrique Freeman, but I mean, Turner needs to spread him out, and Turner really needs to be aggressive. And this is someone on the Pacers too. When Kevin Love is on Myles Turner, the Pacers play the Heat again in 2 days. One day for you listening, the day this comes out. If Kevin Love is guarding Myles Turner should set more screens. Make Kevin Love move. React to those screens. Make him. And what they were pressing up and trapping and trying to get the ball out, and the Pacers just couldn't punish him for it. Some skip passes, some different angles. They can punish that. They absolutely did not in this game. Ben Shepherd hasn't really gotten going since his hot start to the season. Even he, normally an effort, reliable machine, had a few possessions where I just thought he got lost chasing Duncan Robinson around on defense. And Duncan Robinson didn't finish plays well at all. He was 2 for 9, all from threes. But he was getting open. He took 9 threes for a reason, right? He was finding space. And then Mathurin, this is another game that talks about his consistency. His highs have been immense this year. They'd have a much worse record without him this year. But this game, some clear, obvious defensive lapses where he was up too high towards the nail when he shouldn't have been, or just lost his man. And the offense, 4 for 11 for 8 points, no free throw attempts. Drove into crowds too much, a theme from Orlando again. It's consistency with him, because we've seen even in this system this year that he has done much better. All right. I'm not trying to minimize his growth by saying he had a bad game. He had a poor night, but he needs consistency is the thing for him with starting, with minutes, with his long-term future. And he needs to be more consistent in that. They needed him to be good today. And he was like, the Pacers we talked about this with Wes and David on this podcast yesterday. The Pacers' success against the Heat has come at the hands of these kind of guys, Bruce Brown, TJ McConnell, right? The guards who can do all that. McConnell was good. Mathurin had a chance to have that kind of night and didn't. The bench was great. The best thing that happened in this game. Probably a little frustrating if you're the Pacers, because they just had their worst bench night of the season on Wednesday. And if any of them were just okay against Orlando, they win. If Obi Toppin, who had 21 points on 10 shots, Obi Toppin was sensational, hitting some funky shots like the guy we saw at Dayton, hit 3 threes, 3 boards, plus 14 in his 21 and a half minutes. If he was half of that player in Orlando on Wednesday, they win that game, right? He was great, though. He deserved the podium game he got. He was their only 20-point scorer. Obi Toppin played pretty well. He needs to carry that forward. TJ McConnell, 2 for 9 in Orlando. Didn't play very well. 14 points, 4 assists. Kept that group moving. Got into the paint. Was TJ McConnelling against the Heat. If he played like that in Orlando, they win that game. Darius Walker, same thing. I already talked about this, but 4 for 6, 3 for 3 from deep, 7 boards, 4 assists, 7 turnovers. Not good. They won his minutes by 10. If he played like that in Orlando, they would have won that game. I could go on and on. Furphy just didn't do as much. He didn't shoot at all. 2 boards, 1 assist, 1 block for him. Quentin Jackson was awesome. He played 10.5 minutes, got up 5 shots, had 2 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, 1 block, and had 6 points. He looked really good. He continues to make the most of his minutes. The bench all played well. The Pacers needed that 2 days ago. They got it today. And it wasn't enough at all because the starters who were good in Orlando and were plus, I already said this and I have to open the tab again. The starters who were +3 in Orlando were let down by the bench. Today, the opposite happens in a major way as effort, of all things, effort holds the Pacers back. 5-7. They get another chance at the Heat. It's very hard for teams to beat another team twice in the NBA, but you know what? None of the normalcies have come for the Pacers this year. They beat the great teams. They lose to teams they should beat. Doesn't matter what should happen or what has happened. They need to find a way to control what will happen. Heat on Sunday, big game. Pacers are going to practice Saturday. They can get out of their first 13, 6-7. They should not feel good. They have not played well. They'd be under 500. But I will explain to you after that game why that might actually be an okay reality for them. Plenty more to come. We'll talk after Heat Pacers on Sunday. And then they play the Raptors the very next day. So lots of content coming. We'll talk some Mad Ants because their season's underway, and I finally have seen them in person. Talk all sorts of stuff about this Pacers team that is in need of an identity find. Till then, everybody, thank you for listening. Have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy some Hoosier football if you can. We will see you very soon.